Okay, here's a wild thought. What if the women's liberation movement, something we see as a cornerstone of modern progress, was actually built on a fundamental mistake? Today, we're going to dig into a really radical critique that argues the fight for equality isn't freedom at all, but a cleverly disguised trap. So, the source for all of this is Osho's The Book of Women. And just to be clear, we're not just giving you the gist of it, we are diving straight into the text itself to unpack its really challenging and, for a lot of people, pretty controversial arguments, exactly as they're laid out. So, right off the bat, the book poses this really startling question. What if this whole struggle for equality as we know it is actually a deeper, more subtle form of enslavement? I know it's a massive claim, so let's follow the logic and see exactly how this argument gets built. To even begin to understand this critique, we have to first look at what it's critiquing, right? What is the commonly understood goal of liberation in the first place? The conventional view, the one we all pretty much grew up with, is that liberation is all about women proving they are equal to men. It's about competing in every single field, from the boardroom to the political arena, to show that they can match men in every possible way. This is the premise that the source takes direct aim at. And here comes the twist. The text argues that this race for equality, this whole project, it's not freedom. It's actually something way, way more sinister. A deeper kind of slavery. And then you get this quote. And it really stops you in your tracks. The text does not pull any punches. It claims that by trying to be like men, a woman isn't liberated. Instead, she is just becoming a second-rate man. This is really the explosive foundation of the entire critique. So the book gives this a name, Imitation, Liberation. The whole argument is that the movement has just become about, mimicry. If men are aggressive, women must be aggressive. If men are competitive, women must be competitive. The book claims it's a path that's based on copying male behaviors, not celebrating and developing uniquely feminine qualities. And this is where the text draws a really crucial line in the sand. It argues that the first slavery, the historical one, was imposed by men. You could see the chains and you could rebel against them. But this new, deeper slavery, the book claims it's one women are imposing on themselves. And when the chains are psychological, when you believe your cage is actually freedom, how do you even begin to rebel against that? And this all builds up to this really profound psychological paradox that's at the very heart of this argument, this danger of becoming the very enemy you're trying to defeat. The book puts it out there like it's a universal law of conflict. Fighting with anybody is very dangerous because you become like your enemy. The idea here is that the tools you use to fight, the aggression, the competition, they start to shape you, the fighter, no matter what your original intentions were. And this slide, it just lays out the process perfectly, exactly as the book describes it. The fight begins. But to compete, women are told they have to adopt these aggressive, masculine methods. This leads to them becoming hard, competitive, and ultimately, according to the source, they just become a mirror image of the very thing they were fighting against, losing their own authentic identity in the process. And wow, the source is brutally specific about what it sees as the cost here. It claims that femininity itself gets eroded, that softness and grace are replaced by a kind of hardness. It even argues that women are conditioned to see things like home and children as obstacles to their ambition. The text uses some incredibly strong language here, describing women shouting on the streets as ugly versions of men, who are embodying the worst traits of the masculine mind. Okay, so if competition in fighting is the trap, what's the way out? What's the alternative? Well, the source proposes a completely different vision of power, one that's rooted in what it calls the power of softness. So instead of imitation, the source points to a totally different path, one that's built on a completely different kind of power. Not the power of hardness and aggression, but something else entirely. This quote just completely flips the script. Think about that. The claim here is that the hope for humanity isn't women becoming harder, but embracing their softness. In fact, it argues that the world doesn't need more hard women. What it really needs is for men to become softer, more receptive, and more like women. So what is this authentic feminine power? Well, according to the book, it's all about these qualities. Things like love, compassion, vulnerability, intuition. The whole argument is that these are not weaknesses that need to be stamped out. They are immense spiritual strengths that have been devalued and now must be reclaimed. So you can really see the two paths laid out side by side here. And the choice, as the book presents it, becomes crystal clear. On one side, you have the path of imitation, becoming hard, competing with men, and ending up as a second-rate man. And on the other, the path of authenticity, embracing softness, cultivating your own uniqueness, and flowering into a real woman. So, what does this all lead to? Well, it's a completely new definition of freedom. It's not about being the same as men, it's about having the liberty to be authentically, powerfully different. And this quote, I think, really gets to the philosophical core of the whole thing. Man and woman are neither equal nor unequal. They are unique. That single idea tries to dismantle an entire liberation movement that was built on the concept of equality, and instead it proposes that uniqueness is a much higher, maybe even more sacred value. So when you boil it all down, the final takeaway from the text is pretty clear. The real liberation isn't about women changing themselves to fit into a man's world. It's about women fully embracing their authentic feminine nature, and in doing so, forcing society itself to change and to finally value those qualities of softness, love, and intuition. Wow. So that was a journey, right? We've just walked through this incredibly provocative and counterintuitive argument from Osho's The Book of Women, a perspective that really forces you to stop and question what words like liberation, equality, and power even mean. And that leaves us all with a pretty big question to think about. Is true power really found in proving that you are equal to others? Or is it found in having the courage to cultivate the very qualities that make you completely and authentically unique?